the bond of two sisters at heart. In the heart of Ogwante village, nestled between vast green fields and towering palm trees, two young girls grew up together like sisters born from different mothers. Adanna and Ifeanyi were inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. As little girls, they ran through the dusty village paths, climbed mango trees, and swam in the cool river waters during hot afternoons. They shared secrets, dreams, and laughter beneath the bright African moon, whispering about the kind of life they wished for when they grew up. "We will be rich and happy, Ife," Adanna often said, her eyes twinkling with hope. "Yes. No suffering for us," Ifeanyi would add, clapping her hands. Even the elders of the village admired their friendship, often saying, "These two are more than friends, they are soul sisters." Their bond remained unshaken throughout their school years. They worked hard, supported each other, and when the time came, they both left for the big city to attend university. However, as time passed, life led them on two very different paths. Two different destinies. After graduation, Adanna and Ifeanyi lost touch. The struggles of adulthood pulled them in different directions, and soon, their once unbreakable friendship faded into distant memories. Adanna, the quiet and kind-hearted one, met Obinna, a simple, hard-working man with big dreams. He was not rich, but his heart was full of love and kindness. When he asked Adanna to marry him, she didn't hesitate. She saw in him a future built on love, not wealth. Their early years were not easy. Obinna was still trying to find his footing in business, and money was scarce. Some nights, they ate nothing but roasted maize, holding hands and whispering, "One day, things will be better." Despite their struggles, Adanna never regretted her choice. Obinna was a man of integrity, and she knew that true wealth was not just money but the peace and love they shared. Ifeanyi, on the other hand, chose a different kind of life. She married Chief Kolu, a man old enough to be her father but wealthy beyond imagination. His businesses spanned across cities, and he lived in a grand mansion with cars, servants, and riches. While Adanna struggled with her husband in a one-bedroom apartment, Ifeanyi bathed in golden bathtubs and wore designer clothes imported from overseas. But there was one difference: Adanna was happy. Ifeanyi was not. The price of wealth without love. Ifeanyi's marriage was a dream only from the outside. Behind the high walls of her luxurious home, she lived in fear and sadness. Chief Kolu was a jealous, controlling man. He dictated what she wore, who she spoke to, and where she went. Women should be seen, not heard, he often told her, silencing her in public. But the worst part was his infidelity. Ifeanyi knew he had many mistresses, but she dared not complain. Each night, she lay on a silk-covered bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had made a mistake. She had everything money could buy, but not the one thing she truly wanted: love. Years later, a change in fortune. Time passed, and life shifted in unexpected ways. Obinna's hard work finally paid off. He secured a government contract that changed everything. Almost overnight, the man who once struggled to pay rent became one of the most successful businessmen in the city. He built a beautiful house, bought cars, and, more importantly, ensured that Adanna never lacked anything again. One evening, he took her hands in his and said, "My love, you have suffered with me. Now, it is my turn to take care of you." He insisted that she stop working so she could enjoy the home she had helped him build. Adanna was overjoyed. She had supported a man with nothing, and now he had given her everything. Meanwhile, Ifeanyi's world crumbled. Chief Kolu's businesses collapsed. His corrupt dealings were exposed, and his properties were seized. With no money left, he took another younger woman and abandoned Ifeanyi. She lost everything overnight. The same people who once praised her disappeared, and for the first time, she tasted the bitterness of poverty. An old friend's return. One fateful afternoon, as Adanna shopped in a luxurious supermarket, picking out groceries with her children, she heard a familiar voice. Adanna. She turned around and gasped. Standing before her was Ifunanya, but she was no longer the proud, elegant woman she once knew. Her once glowing skin looked dull, her expensive clothes were now cheap and worn, and her proud posture was now bent with struggle. But despite her poor state, Ifunanya forced a smile, trying to hide her pain. The two women embraced, tears filling their eyes. It's been so long, Ifunanya whispered. Adanna introduced her children, and Ifunanya felt a sharp pang of jealousy. She looked at Adanna's beautiful dress, her healthy children, and the expensive groceries in her shopping cart. Life had been kind to her friend, while it had been cruel to her. Adanna, unaware of her friend's growing envy, invited Ifunanya to her home. Come visit me tomorrow. I want to hear everything about your life, she said kindly. Ifunanya smiled, but in her heart, hatred burned like fire. She looked at Adanna's life, the wealth, the love, the happiness. And in that moment, she made a vow to herself. If I can't have a happy marriage, neither will she. A grand welcome. The next afternoon, Ifunanya arrived at Adanna's home, her heart pounding as she stepped out of the taxi. Before her stood a mansion more beautiful than anything she had ever seen, a grand compound with lush gardens, a fountain, and a driveway lined with luxury cars. As she walked through the elegant front doors, the cool air from the air conditioning brushed against her skin. She felt a deep sting of jealousy. So this is how she lives now? Ifunanya whispered to herself. A housekeeper, neatly dressed in uniform, ushered her into the spacious living room. Ifunanya's eyes roamed the golden chandeliers, the fine leather furniture, the polished marble floors. Everything screamed wealth and comfort. Then, Adanna appeared, glowing with happiness. Ife, she called out excitedly, hugging her. Ifunanya forced a smile, hiding her bitterness behind false excitement. Adanna, this house is breathtaking. Adanna laughed humbly. Obinna worked hard for this. God has been good to us. Ifunanya clenched her fist but kept her smile intact. The perfect husband. Soon, the two friends sat down with glasses of fresh juice. Adanna's 4 children ran into the living room, well-dressed, full of life, and radiating happiness. Mama, who is this? The eldest daughter asked. This is Auntie Ifunanya, my childhood best friend, Adanna said with pride. The children greeted respectfully before running back to play. Ifunanya sighed. They looked so well-mannered, so cared for, so different from the struggling life she now lived. As they talked, Obinna walked in, a tall, confident, dressed in a crisp white shirt and navy trousers. The scent of his cologne filled the air as he walked over to kiss Adanna's forehead gently. Ife, welcome, he greeted warmly, giving a respectful nod. Ifunanya watched in disbelief. A wealthy man who still adored his wife. It was something she had never experienced with Chief Kolu. Adanna smiled, resting her hand over her husband's. This man is my everything. Even when we had nothing, he was my rock. Ifunanya's stomach twisted. How was it possible that Adanna, who once struggled just like her, now had everything she had ever wanted? The breaking point. That evening, Ifunanya prepared to leave, but just as she reached for her bag, Obinna turned to Adanna with a warm smile. My love, he said, holding her hand, go get ready. I'm taking you out for a special dinner tonight. Adanna's eyes lit up. A special dinner. Yes, he chuckled, touching her cheek softly. You've done so much for this family. You deserve to be spoiled. Ifunanya's fingers dug into her bag strap. She could barely breathe from the jealousy burning inside her. Chief Kolu never once took her out. Never once looked at her like this. She forced a tight smile as Adanna ran upstairs to change. As Ifunanya watched Obinna help the housekeeper set the table for the children, she felt something inside her snap. I refuse to suffer alone, she thought bitterly. If she couldn't have a happy marriage, neither would Adanna. And in that moment, her plan was born. The seed of doubt. The next morning, Ifunanya returned to Adanna's home with one goal, to plant a seed of doubt in her friend's mind. Sitting in the living room, she leaned in closer. Adanna, let me ask you something, and be honest with me. Adanna smiled. Of course, Ife. What is it? Ifunanya sighed dramatically, shaking her head. Why doesn't Obinna want you to work anymore? Adanna blinked in surprise. He just wants me to rest. I struggled with him for years. Now that he can provide for us, he wants me to enjoy life. Ifunanya let out a mocking chuckle. Adanna, wake up. That's exactly what men say when they want to control their wives. Adanna frowned. Control? No, Ife, you don't understand. Obinna is different. Ifunanya leaned in even closer, lowering her voice. No man is different. Think about it, what if he just wants you to be dependent on him? What if he is hiding something? Adanna shook her head, laughing nervously. No, Ife. You are wrong. Obinna has never given me a reason to doubt him. Ifunanya sighed, playing with her nails. Are you sure? You're so in love with him, maybe you don't see what's right in front of you. Adanna swallowed, a small flicker of doubt forming in her mind. She quickly dismissed it. The poison of jealousy. The next time Ifunanya visited, she pushed even further. Adanna, I need to ask you something serious. Adanna, now slightly wary, nodded. Are you sure Obinna is faithful to you? Adanna froze. What kind of question is that? Ifunanya shrugged dramatically. No man is that perfect, Adanna. He's rich now, and rich men have options. Adanna's heart pounded. Obinna had never given her a reason to doubt him, but Ifunanya's words planted a dangerous thought in her mind. What if? What if he was only pretending to be faithful? Ifunanya smiled inwardly. She could see the change in Adanna's face. The beginning of change. That night, Adanna lay in bed beside Obinna, staring at the ceiling. His soft breathing filled the room, but she found herself restless. Why doesn't he want me to walk? Why is he so perfect? Could Ifunanya be right? For the first time in her marriage, doubt crept into her heart. She turned slightly, watching Obinna sleep peacefully. Could he be hiding something? She sighed and closed her eyes, but the questions refused to leave her mind. Ifunanya's plan had begun to work. A new seed of restlessness. Ever since Ifunanya's poisonous words entered Adanna's mind, she found herself questioning things she never questioned before. She had always been happy being a stay-at-home wife, caring for her children and managing the home while Obinna provided for everything. But now she wondered. Why doesn't he want me to work? What if he just wants to control me? What if he's cheating on me, and I'm here being a fool? At first, she pushed the thought away, but each time Ifunanya visited, she fed her more doubts. Adanna, listen to me, Ifunanya said one afternoon, sipping her drink. A woman must have her own money. What if something happens to Obinna? Or worse, what if he is hiding another woman somewhere? Adanna laughed nervously. Obinna is not like that. Ifunanya rolled her eyes. Oh, please. That's what every woman says before she wakes up one day and realizes she was blind. Adanna's stomach tightened. She loved Obinna with all her heart. She trusted him. But Ifunanya's words were beginning to make her see problems where there were none. And then, one evening, she made a decision. She was going to open a business, whether Obinna approved or not. A wife's decision, a husband's confusion. That night, after dinner, Adanna approached Obinna in their bedroom. He was sitting on the bed, reading a business document when she sat beside him and took his hand. "My love," she began. "I have been thinking. I want to start my own business." Obinna looked up, surprised. "Business? But I thought we already talked about this." Adanna sighed. "Yes, we did, but I've changed my mind. I don't want to just sit at home doing nothing." Obinna closed his document and faced her properly. "Adanna, you are not doing nothing. You are raising our children. That is a full-time job." "Yes, but I also want my own independence," she snapped. Obinna's brows furrowed. This was not the Adanna he knew. The Adanna he married had been content and happy. But now, something was different. "Is something wrong?" he asked gently. "Is there something I'm not giving you?" Adanna felt a flicker of guilt, but she quickly pushed it away. "No, Obinna. I just want my own money. I don't want to depend on you for everything." Obinna's face softened. "But, my love, you lack nothing. I have worked hard so you and the children never have to worry." Adanna's voice rose. "That's not the point. Why don't you want me to work?" Obinna took a deep breath. "Because I want our children to have their mother's full attention. We built this life together. Now that we are comfortable, I want you to enjoy it. I don't want you to stress yourself." Adanna crossed her arms. "Or maybe you just want to control me." Obinna's head snapped up in shock. "What? Maybe you just don't want me to make my own money so I'll always be under you," she muttered. Obinna felt a sharp pain in his chest. Where was this coming from? For years, they had struggled together, and now he was giving her everything she had ever wanted. Why was she suddenly questioning him? A home filled with tension. That night, they went to bed without speaking. It was the first time in years that Adanna had turned away from him in bed. Days passed, and things got worse. Adanna, encouraged by Ifunanya, became distant. She stopped laughing with Obinna. She stopped spending time with the children. She stopped welcoming him home with warmth. Instead, she focused on her new business idea. She began saving her monthly allowance in secret, listening to Ifunanya's advice. "Obinna won't approve, so just do it behind his back," Ifunanya told her. And that was exactly what Adanna did. Obinna noticed the change. The house that was once filled with peace was now filled with silence and tension. He tried talking to Adanna, but she always dismissed him. And slowly, Obinna began to feel lonely. A husband's pain. One evening, Obinna came home early from work, hoping to have dinner with his wife and children. But when he walked in, the dining table was empty. No food. No laughter. No Adanna. The housekeeper approached him. "Sir, should I serve your dinner?" "Where is Adanna?" Obinna asked. The housekeeper hesitated. She left early in the morning. She has not returned." Obinna's chest tightened. He checked the time. It was 9 p.m. Where was his wife? A sharp pain twisted inside him. When had his home stopped feeling like a home? The perfect opportunity. Ifunanya was watching everything unfold, and she was pleased. She could see the cracks forming in Adanna's once perfect marriage. And now, she was ready for the final stage of her plan. Ifunanya started getting close to Obinna. Whenever Adanna was out, Ifunanya would call him. "Obinna, I just wanted to check on you. You sound tired." Obinna, feeling neglected and lonely, found comfort in her voice. She listened to him. She comforted him. She was there when Adanna was not. Little by little, she was drawing him closer. And soon, the perfect moment would come for her to strike. a shoulder to lean on. Obinna sat alone in his car, staring into the dark night. The house he had once called a home now felt like a prison. Adanna was barely home these days. When she was either too tired or too distracted to even notice him. The laughter that once filled their house had disappeared. She had changed. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. He couldn't understand how the woman he loved, the woman he had struggled with for years, had suddenly become so distant. Just then, his phone rang. Ifunanya. He hesitated before answering. Obinna, are you okay? She asked, her voice soft and concerned. Obinna sighed. I don't know anymore. Ifunanya smiled to herself. Her plan was working perfectly. Talk to me, she whispered. I'm here for you. The poison of deception. Ifunanya became Obinna's confidant. Every night, when Adanna was out late with her business, Ifunanya would call him. She listened as he poured out his pain and confusion. And then, she planted the seeds of doubt. Obinna, open your eyes. Adanna doesn't love you anymore. She only wanted your money. Now that she has her own, she doesn't need you. A real woman would never neglect her husband like this. At first, Obinna refused to believe her words. No, Adanna is not like that. But the more Ifunanya spoke, the more her words made sense. The love and warmth Adanna once had for him was gone. Ifunanya, on the other hand, was always there. Always listening. Always supportive. And soon, he began to seek her company. The moment of weakness. One evening, Obinna sat in his car outside Ifunanya's apartment. He had nowhere else to go. He didn't want to go home to an empty house. And Ifunanya had invited him over for dinner. You need someone to talk to, Obinna. Just come over, she had said. So he did. She welcomed him warmly, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her scent intoxicating. They talked, they laughed, and for the first time in a long while, Obinna felt seen. Then, Ifunanya moved closer. You deserve to be loved, Obinna, she whispered. Obinna didn't resist when she leaned in and kissed him. And that night, he betrayed the woman he once loved with all his heart. The hidden betrayal. For weeks, the affair continued in secret. Obinna told himself it was just comfort, that it meant nothing. But with each passing day, he felt less guilty. Adanna was too busy with her business to notice anything. She would come home late, exhausted, barely speaking to him. And so, he fell deeper into Ifunanya's arms. The suspicious messages. One evening, Adanna returned home early. She found Obinna in the shower, and his phone was left unlocked on the bed. Something told her to check it. She hesitated at first. No, I trust my husband. But then, Ifunanya's words echoed in her mind. No man is that perfect. Slowly, she picked up the phone. And what she saw shattered her world. Messages from Ifunanya. Last night was amazing. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again, my love. Adanna will never know. Adanna felt her knees weaken. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst. Her best friend. Her husband. The two people she trusted most. Betraying her together. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped the phone, her body shaking in rage. The confrontation. Obinna stepped out of the shower, wiping his face with a towel. He froze when he saw Adanna standing there, her face red with anger, her hands clenched into fists. Then he saw his phone on the bed. His heart stopped. She knew. Obinna. Her voice was dangerously low. Tell me this is not real. Silence. Obinna looked away. He had no words. Adanna let out a bitter laugh. My own husband. With my own best friend. Obinna tried to reach for her. Adanna, please. Slap. Her palm struck his face, hard. Tears poured from her eyes as rage and heartbreak consumed her. I gave you everything, Obinna. I sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay me. Obinna opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a voice interrupted. What's going on here? Ifeanyi stood at the door. Adanna turned to her. And then, she lunged. She grabbed Ifeanyi's hair and dragged her to the ground, screaming. You snake! You destroyed my marriage. Ifeanyi shrieked, struggling to break free. Obinna quickly pulled Adanna back, but she was shaking with rage. You can have him, she spat. Both of you deserve each other. Then she turned to Obinna, her eyes filled with pain and betrayal. I never thought I'd say this, but I hate you. Obinna felt his chest tighten as guilt hit him like a storm. He had lost her. Forever. Therefore, Adanna packed her things that night. She took her children and left the home they had built together. As she walked out of the house, Obinna called after her. Adanna, please. Don't do this. She didn't turn back. She didn't cry anymore. She was done. And as Obinna watched his wife and children disappear into the night, he realized the depth of his mistake. He had lost everything. Ifeanyi smiled to herself. She had won. Or so she thought. But karma was watching. And soon, justice would come. The queen takes her throne. Ifeanyi stood in the middle of Adanna's living room, her arms crossed, a victorious smirk on her lips. She had won. Adanna was gone. The house, the wealth, and Obinna himself, all belonged to her now. She paraded through the mansion, running her fingers along the expensive furniture, breathing in the scent of victory. She had spent years being jealous of Adanna, and now, finally, she had taken her place. But what Ifeanyi didn't know was that she hadn't taken Adanna's life, she had taken her own curse. And karma was watching. A love that was never there. At first, Obinna tried to make it work. He told himself that Ifeanyi was just misunderstood, that she would make a good wife if given time. But it didn't take long for the illusion to break. Ifeanyi was nothing like Adanna. She was demanding, disrespectful, and ungrateful. She wanted more and more, designer clothes, gold jewelry, expensive vacations. She wasted his money carelessly, hosting loud parties and entertaining her new rich friends. Obinna felt trapped. He had ruined his marriage, lost his family, and for what? A woman who saw him as nothing but an ATM. A home turned into a battleground. The peaceful home that had once been filled with love and laughter became a place of fights and regret. Ifeanyi nagged him constantly. She complained that he wasn't giving her enough money. She insulted him for coming home late from work. She mocked him, calling him weak and pathetic. Whenever he tried to defend himself, she would yell even louder, throw things, break dishes, and slam doors. I left my rich husband for you, and this is what I get, she screamed one night, her voice shaking with rage. Obinna sat in the living room, his head in his hands. He missed Adanna. He missed her kindness, her patience, her love. He missed coming home to a warm meal instead of loud fights. He missed his children. And for the first time, he realized the full weight of his mistake. He had thrown away gold for a piece of cheap glass. And now, the glass was shattering. Meanwhile, Adanna was suffering. While Ifeanyi enjoyed Obinna's wealth, Adanna was living in a nightmare. Her business had been doing well, and she had started to rebuild her life. But then, tragedy struck. One night, a faulty electrical wire in her shop sparked a fire. By the time the firefighters arrived, everything had burned to ashes. All her goods. All her hard work. Gone. She stood in front of the smoking ruins, her heart pounding with fear and despair. What am I going to do? With no business and no money, she struggled to take care of her children. She sold the little jewelry she had left, trying to buy food. But it wasn't enough. Her children cried from hunger. She could barely afford rent, and soon, they were forced to leave their small apartment. From a wealthy businessman's wife, Adanna was now homeless. She sat on a park bench one night, hugging her shivering children close, praying for a miracle. She had lost everything. And yet, despite all the suffering, she never wished evil upon Obinna. She only prayed that one day, he would realize the truth. The night of karma. One night, Obinna returned home late from work. Ifunanya was waiting for him. Her eyes were filled with anger. "Where have you been?" she demanded. Obinna sighed. "I had a long day, Ifunanya. I don't want to fight tonight." But Ifunanya was not in the mood for peace. "You think you can just come and go as you please?" Obinna clenched his fist, trying to stay calm. "I am working to maintain this house, Ifunanya. You do nothing but spend my money. Maybe you should try working for once." Ifunanya's eyes darkened with rage. "What did you say?" Before he could react, she grabbed a wooden pestle from the kitchen. Crack! She swung it at him, hitting his forehead with brutal force. Obinna stumbled back, blood dripping down his face. He collapsed onto the floor, his vision spinning. Everything became a blur. And in that moment, as pain shot through his body, he realized. Ifunanya never loved him. She never wanted him. She only wanted his money, his status, his home. He had betrayed the only woman who truly loved him for this. And now, he was paying the price. Karma had come full circle. The fall of Ifunanya. The security guards rushed in at the sound of the fight. They saw Obinna lying on the floor, bleeding. And Ifunanya. She was standing over him, breathing heavily, still gripping the pestle. The guards knew what had happened. They called the police. And that night, Ifunanya was arrested. As they dragged her out of the house, kicking and screaming, she shouted, "I regret nothing. He deserved it." But it didn't matter anymore. She had lost everything. She had destroyed Adanna's home, only to be thrown out of it herself. Now, she would have nothing but a prison cell. Obinna's regret. Days later, after being treated in the hospital, Obinna sat alone in his mansion. For the first time in months, the house was silent. There were no children laughing. There was no Adanna singing in the kitchen. There was no warmth. He was alone. And it was his fault. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He had betrayed the woman who gave him everything. And now, he had nothing but a man at his lowest. Obinna lay in a hospital bed, his head wrapped in thick bandages. The room was quiet except for the beeping of machines and the soft whispers of nurses outside the door. Pain throbbed in his skull, but it was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. His life was in ruins. He had lost Adanna. He had lost his children. He had lost his peace. All because he had trusted the wrong woman. Karma had punished him severely, and now, he had nothing left but regret. He let out a deep sigh, staring at the white ceiling. God, if I could just have one more chance. I would do everything differently. Little did he know that fate was about to give him that chance. A familiar face in the hospital. In the hallway, Adanna paced nervously outside the children's ward. Her youngest son, Chism, had fallen ill the night before with a high fever. She had rushed him to the hospital, using the last of her money to pay for his treatment. Her heart was heavy with worry, but she remained strong for her child. Just then, a nurse walked up to her. "Madam, your son is stable now. You can go home and rest." Adanna sighed in relief. Thank you, nurse. I will check on him once more before I leave. As she turned towards the ward, she passed by another room and stopped. Through the half-open door, she saw a man lying in bed, wrapped in bandages. Her heart clenched. It was Obinna. For a moment, she stood frozen, torn between anger, pain, and something deeper, pity. She had spent months trying to forget him, but now, here he was, broken, alone, and suffering. Before she could stop herself, she stepped inside. A painful reunion. Obinna sensed someone enter the room and slowly turned his head. When he saw Adanna, his breath caught in his throat. She was still beautiful. But there was pain in her eyes. Pain that he had caused. Tears immediately welled up in his own eyes. Adanna, his voice was hoarse, filled with regret and longing. She stared at him in silence, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, Obinna broke down. He covered his face with his hands, sobbing. I am so sorry, Adanna. I have failed you. I have failed our children. Adanna's lips trembled, but she remained silent. Obinna continued, his voice shaking. I was a fool. I let that woman deceive me. I betrayed you, the only person who ever truly loved me. Adanna's eyes darkened at the mention of Ifenanya. Obinna looked up at her, desperate. She lied to me, Adanna. She told me you didn't love me. That you were cheating. That you only wanted my money. And you believed her. Adanna's voice was sharp, filled with hurt and disbelief. Obinna nodded miserably. Yes, but I see the truth now. She never loved me. She only wanted my wealth. And when she could no longer use me, she tried to kill me. Adanna's chest tightened. She had spent so many nights hating him, but now, standing here, seeing him broken and full of regret, something in her heart softened. She sat down beside him, staring at him closely. Where is Ifenanya now? She asked. Obinna sighed heavily. She ran away before the police could take her to court. She is gone, Adanna. Adanna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Ifenanya had destroyed her home, but now, she was nothing. Justice had been served. A chance at forgiveness. Obinna took a deep, shaky breath, gathering the courage to speak the words that weighed on his heart. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Adanna. He reached for her hand, his voice breaking. But please, if there is even the smallest part of you that still cares, give me one last chance to make things right. Adanna felt tears well up in her own eyes. Could she forgive him? Could she ever trust him again? For months, she had prayed for strength, for guidance. And now, as she looked at the father of her children, the man she had once built a life with, she realized something. She still loved him. Not the same blind love of the past. But a stronger, wiser love, one that understood the weight of mistakes and the power of redemption. She squeezed his hand gently. Obinna, she whispered. We cannot undo the past. But we can decide our future. Obinna held his breath, afraid to hope. Then, at last, she spoke the words that would change everything. I forgive you. Obinna broke down in sobs, pressing her hand to his forehead. For the first time in months, he felt the weight of his sins lift from his soul. And he vowed, with every fiber of his being, never to take her for granted again. Rebuilding a broken home. A week later, Obinna was discharged from the hospital. And waiting outside for him was Adanna and their children. His heart swelled as he saw them, his beautiful wife, his precious children. He walked toward them slowly, uncertain. Would they accept him? But before he could say a word, his younger son, Chisholm, ran forward and threw his arms around his legs. Papa! Tears streamed down Obinna's face as he picked him up, holding him close. And then, one by one, his other children embraced him, welcoming him home. Finally, he turned to Adanna. She smiled softly. "Come home, Obinna." And with that, he knew he had been given a second chance. Together, as a family, they returned home. The moral lesson. Months later, as Obinna and Adanna sat together in the garden, watching their children play, they reflected on all that had happened. "I almost lost everything because I let someone else's words poison my mind," Obinna admitted. Adanna nodded, squeezing his hand. "Not all friends wish you well, Obinna. Some only come to destroy." They had learned their lesson. Small blue diamond, be careful what you share about your marriage. Small blue diamond, not everyone is a true friend. Small blue diamond, a good marriage is built on trust, not outside opinions. And most importantly, they learned that forgiveness and love could heal even the deepest wounds. Their story was not perfect, but it was theirs. And this time, they vowed to protect it with all their hearts. Forever. The end.